have a long time for rest and sleeping. I just thought I'd mention a few things important, I think, and historical in this time. And one is about the theme of symbolism. I think all of us were very impressed yesterday when we went to the Al-Qazar, and we heard from our tour guide, and she was speaking about the symbolism in the geometry and artwork of the Muslims, and how they created these patterns and the kind of projected image of Pedro the king and what he wanted people to see of himself. And this is about self-image and image making, and that was of course very important for all the kings and monarchs on both the Christian and Muslim side, about image making, about how they wanted the world to see them, just like the Madinatu Zahra as a symbol or status of power. So when Uthman III would use his diplomat Hasta ibn Shaprut, the Jewish individual, to go and call people from the centers of power outside of Andalus, it looked amazing that they would see a city like Medina al-Zahra. Now symbolism of course can be favorable, and it can be the opposite of that. It could be negative. You could have, it could work against you, it could work for you, it could work against you. And there was a very interesting thing that happened in the year 997 here in Al-Andalus with the ruler who was the Hajj of the Chamberlain, Al-Mansur, our brother spoke about yesterday. Now, as you know, Al-Mansur, he would make these raids against the Christians of the north a lot, in Jaraz, Arcos, and other places. He would attack them, and it served a purpose because he's pushing them back. The more they're encroaching inwards, he's pushing them back to the north. But in the year 997, he goes to a place called Santiago de Compostela, and the Santiago de Compostela is a place where Christians believe are the remains of James, Saint James, who they call the Lord's brother in the Bible, who they believe was Jesus' brother, James the Apostle. And that's what they believe. They believe the remains of James are in that place. And so Al-Mansur, maybe he didn't know that, but he goes there and he attacks the church, destroys the church. And then he takes the bells from the church and puts them on donkeys and rides them all the way to Cordoba to be used as shades for the lamps of the mosque of Cordoba. Now this is remarkable because it transformed Christian identity. It transformed the way that Christians now saw of themselves. Saint James was always seen as as a peaceful a disciple of Jesus, but now James in Spanish identity became known as James Matamoros, and Matamoros means James the Moor slayer, meaning the slayer of the Muslims. And it was unparalleled that you would have a Christian iconic a person like James, who could be used now to justify the warfare and the reconquest of Al-Andalus. So that's an indication of symbolism. The same way, now by the way, so when Al-Mansur brought the church bells down to Cordoba to be used as lamps for the shades, when the reconquest happened, when everything was taken from the Muslims and Masjid Cordoba then became transformed into a church, they took the bells back from the Masjid Cordoba, put them on the backs of horses, and rode them all the way back to Santiago de Compostela. And again, it was symbolic that they would be taken back on horses. This is all symbolism. But the thing is, it could work against us. The essential element is to always establish adl, is to always be just. Allah in the Quran, He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, kunu qawwamina bil qisti shuhada'a lillah, walau ala anfusikum, aw lil walidayni wal aqrabin. Allah says, oh you believe, stand upright, be upright for justice, for Allah's sake, right? Even if it's against yourselves, or it's against your families or your near of kin. This is about the impediment of love. Impediment of love. Possible impediment of love. You could love somebody so much, it could swerve you from being just. In another similar verse in the Quran, you have the impediment of hate, where Allah says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kunu qawwamina lillah, shuhada'a bil qist. وَلَيَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا اعْدِلُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Allah says, oh you believe, stand upright for Allah. This time Allah comes first, justice comes second, witnesses to justice, and do not let your hatred for a people swerve you from being just. Allah says, be just, and that is closest to taqwa. So This makes no difference. If Christians are living with you, you have to be just towards them. Jews, be just towards them. Look at symbolism. Because a lot of what we encounter today as Muslims in the West, people before us have gone through the same problems. And it happened here in Andalus. So for example, when Muslims were expelled from Andalus, this is before expulsion from Granada, 1247, James I of Aragon began to expel Muslims. 100,000 Muslims were expelled. They were forced to wear different colored clothing so to be recognized as Muslims. You had compounds called the Judarias and the Morias. The Judarias for the Jews and the Morias for the Muslims, meaning therefore excluding them from society. They had to live on the outside of the city. They had to pay higher taxes. They were forced to eat pork and forced to drink wine. All these things happened. But it also happened to the Jews. And it happened to the Jews before the Muslims even set foot in Al-Andalus with Rikarat I, Chintila. These were Visigoths and Christian monarchs who forced the Jews to become baptized, just like it happened, the brother will tell us, later on in Granada, and later on with expulsion. Forced baptism, forced conversion to Christianity happened with the Jews before we came. The Jews were expelled from Al-Andalus before the Muslims even arrived in Al-Andalus. So we see this cyclical happening, this pattern of mistreatment of others. The beautiful thing in Islam, of course, is that we live by the premise of adl, of qist. Allah says, وَأَقْسِطُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. Be equitable. Allah loves those who are equitable and those who live by the framework of justice. And this is therefore is important when you think about symbolism. The way that image making exists with us, it also exists with the others. Christians would seek therefore to assert their self-identity through an image making. Now another very important thing that we might have missed is that there's something cataclysmic happening also elsewhere. And what is it? What else is happening in the 12th century? Who knows? Very big event. 12th century. 11th century, 12th century.
Crusades.
Crusades. That's it. The Crusades is happening. Now the Crusades was launched from where? Just above Al-Andalus, which is France, right? So the Christian Pope Urban II launched the Crusades in 1095. But here's the thing to remember, 1089. So there's a struggle in Zaragoza, here in Al-Andalus, over at the church of Zaragoza. And what Pope Urban II does even before he announces a crusade is that he gives the same rights, the same reward, which is remission of sins, to those who went to defend the church of Zaragoza that he did for those who went to liberate Jerusalem from the Muslims. Right? The same remission of sins, the same reward were given for those. This is why when the Crusades happened, you had all these crusaders travel from Western Europe, from France, went from France to Byzantium, then southwards to Jerusalem, but not from Spain. You don't have many crusaders, in fact, from Spain that went from Spain. You had some, but not many, from Spain to Jerusalem, because their job was just to fight in Spain. That was their crusade. And this is something important to remember, because if it was sanctioned by the Pope, it means it's a matter of fact for the Catholics, because they believe the Pope is infallible in dogma. He can't make a mistake in that. So in 1095, the crusade was launched. Pope Urban II announces that the Christians, and these were brigands, these were thieves and bad people, murderers, the ones who were listening to his speech from Clermont, had to go and fight the Muslims and liberate them. But the same way that people are motivated by stereotypes and lies and misinformation, that's really what spurred on the Crusaders, because in his speech he would say things like, the Muslims worship Muhammad, the mosques are places of sacrifices of babies to Muhammad. All these things were happening, and therefore it's based upon lies. In any case, they went down. Now, there was something that was truthful. This is true that happened in the Crusades. In the year 1009, the Fatimid Shia Khalif, called Al-Hakam bi Amr Allah, he destroyed a part of the Holy Sepulchre. The Holy Sepulchre is what the Christians believe is the most sacred place on earth. They believe, and they falsely believe, that Isa alayhi salam was buried there in Holy Sepulchre, in Al-Quds in Jerusalem. And so this Fatimid Khalifa destroys a part of it. Now Christian pilgrims are traveling from, France and Europe all the way down to Jerusalem to visit to the Holy Sepulchre, and they're sending information back and saying the Muslims are destroying the Holy Sepulchre, and this enraged the Christians, and so the Pope Urban II used this as part of his propaganda, as part of his speech, saying you have to go and defend Mother Church, and the Mother Church was the Holy Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But the point is this, the church was destroyed. You see, it was destroyed by Hakim II, and it has of course a very negative effect. A bit like when we discuss the Santiago de Compostela, it was used against us because they used that as a stimulus for the reconquest. And also, by the way, when Muslims were finally expelled and they left from Alhambra, Granada, and the full expulsion happened, the Christians, Ferdinand and Isabella, entered Granada with what flag? The flag of the Compostela. Flag of the Compostela. So you see, it has, the symbolism is always there. It's about image making. And so this is, I think, important for us to remember about the influence of the Crusades here in Al-Andalus. There was a man, a Muslim scholar called Ali ibn Tahir as-Sulami. As-Sulami wrote a book in the year 1103 or 1104 called Kitab al-Jihad. It was a book of jihad. This was, by the way, for those interested in the Crusades, this was the first text ever written by any scholar proclaiming the defense of Al-Quds, of Jerusalem. As-Sulami's text is very famous because what As-Sulami does is he outlines the plan of the Crusaders, not just but in fact the Western Church. And he says, look, the Crusaders, the Christians have taken Sicily, they've taken Spain, Al-Andalus, and now they're en route to take Jerusalem from us. And they want more than that. They want to take the coastlines and they want to expand further. And of course they did, because future crusades were targeted towards Damyat, towards Egypt, Damascus. They wanted more than just Al-Quds. And so As-Sulami was quite a genius because he had this vision way before people could even think of what's happening. They thought the Crusaders were Byzantine, hordes coming to plunder, but they were not. They came with quite a very strong religious identity, and the same way that the Crusaders had the motto of "Dus Vult," of God wills it, killing it's okay because God wills it. In Al-Andalus, when Ferdinand and Isabella went into Alhambra, they went with the Detuum, they went with the songs of valor and courage, just like before. So this is very important for us to remember about the way that the Christian church is working in unison, and also about the importance of unity, because the Christian church, why was the Christian church in France directing the church in Spain? It's different landscapes, different spheres of operations, different people. Here you had, like we mentioned yesterday, the Mozarabs, Musa'arribin. These were the Spaniards, the Spanish, who were influenced so much by Muslim culture. They began to dress like Muslims, eat like Muslims, read Arabic, learn Arabic, and then many of them ended up becoming Muslim. These were the Mozarabs. Now the church, the Pope, was very worried about this because he thought this is going to mean that the ones who are in control of the church in Spain are going to be Mozarabs, like Mozarab priests in charge of the Catholic Church in Spain. And to disallow this, what he did is he asserted control over Al-Andalus. This was one reason. Number two was because of the schism, the problem, the schism, the fitna that they have between themselves and the Greek Orthodox Church in Byzantium. And so therefore, what it actually did, it actually bolstered the power and the support of the Catholic Church, even though things weren't going very well for the Catholics here a lot of time in Al-Andalus, because they were stuck to the north. There was a growth of what was growing in the 10th century here. What was growing is monasticism, Cluniac monasticism. So the Catholics, they have four main orders, like we have Sufi orders. They had also something similar. They had monastic orders, the Cluniacs, the Carthusians, the Gilbertines, the Franciscans, these are four ones. The Gilbertines were the ones that went to England. They were English ones. But here you had the Cluniac monasticism, and this is growing and growing. The Knights Templars of the Crusaders were also like this. They were monastic people. They were monastic order. They were those who were forced to fast. They had to pray all day. They had to live in monasteries, and then when they go out to fight and defend the Christians against the Muslims. And so I just thought I'd mention a few of these parallels between what is happening with the church up above Spain, which is in France, and what is happening in Spain at the same time with the onset and the arrival of the Crusaders. And so on this topic, and that is about Islamophobia and what the Jews experience here in Andalus, and then what we experience later on with Islamophobia and here and the ethnic cleansing of the Muslims from Andalus. So I was in Auschwitz just 3 months ago, and we visited Auschwitz and Birkenau, and again you see the parallels in the creation of the Akhar, al-Akharin, the existential other. Or it's very easy for us as Muslims to do the same thing, in fact, to other people, to turn others into existential others. You see, we're unworthy of rights, unworthy of life, unworthy of dignity. It happened to us here in Al-Andalus because Muslims were no longer considered as worthy. Ethnic cleansing means you believe that ethnicity is not worthy of human life anymore, or not worthy of coexistence. They have to be expelled, like what we're experiencing now in Palestine for a long time, happened here in Andalus. But what the Jews experienced of propaganda against them, for stereotyping and otherizing, is what we experience as Muslims oftentimes in England. And I think it's important because our Prophet has said that we will be very much like the Bani Israel. Things that affected them will affect us also. And I think Al-Andalus is one of the areas that you're seeing a lot of those similarities. So I think it's time for all of us to rest and sleep now.